Welcome back to the Vale Echo. Tonight, we walk the fog-drenched streets of Victorian London, where fear once again took form not in the blade of Jack the Ripper, but in the hands of a doctor whose cure was death itself. It's 1891. London's gas lamps flicker against cobblestone streets slick with rain. The Ripper's shadow still lingers, but in those same dark alleys another predator watches, calm, calculating, and educated. His name, Dr. Thomas Neill Cream. Behind the frosted window of a dimly lit pharmacy, rows of glass jars shimmer arsenic, chloroform, morphine, his instruments of quiet terror. Cream was no ordinary physician. His medical bag held more than tools of healing, it was a portable arsenal of death. He moved like a ghost through Lambeth's alleyways, his tall frame wrapped in a black overcoat, top hat tilted low, his eyes sharp with unholy purpose. Women, often poor and vulnerable, became his patients and his victims. He offered them medicine, promising relief, safety, or escape, but what they swallowed was poison. Within hours, agony followed. Their bodies convulsed, breath fading as Cream vanished into the London mist, leaving no trace but death and whispers. The police, still haunted by their failure to catch the Ripper, found themselves chasing another phantom. Detectives pored over case files under flickering lamps, papers scattered, theories whispered. The streets murmured of the Doctor Poisoner, yet no one dared speak his name too loud. Meanwhile, Cream watched from the shadows, amused. He wrote letters blackmailing innocent men, boasting of crimes only the killer could know. It was as if he wanted to be caught or perhaps wanted to be feared. The arrogance of intellect turned to madness. Each new headline struck terror across London. Mysterious poisoner strikes again. Women no longer trusted their doctors. Every pill, every drink became a potential weapon. The city that thought it had survived its darkest days realized evil had simply changed its face. In 1892, the night finally caught up with him. Police tracked Cream's movements, connecting the deaths, the poisons, the letters. Witnesses spoke of a man in a dark coat, his medical bag always near. When they arrested him, he offered only a cold smirk, the kind that freezes your soul. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. As testimonies unfolded, Cream stood still, emotionless. The once respected doctor now faced the gallows, and yet, even in judgment, he carried himself like a man proud of his crimes, convinced he was above the law. Behind prison walls, his candle burned low. But the fear he created, the dread of medicine turned murder, spread across oceans. For Dr. Thomas Neill Cream was only beginning his reign of terror. And as the London fog swallowed Pentonville's walls that night, no one knew that his dark journey would soon cross the Atlantic, taking death to new continents. The poisoner's story was far from over. After his arrest in London, the shadows of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream's past began to stretch far beyond the Thames. Welcome back to the Vale Echo. Tonight, the fog of London gives way to the roaring storms of the Atlantic, where Cream's sinister voyage carried him across the ocean and into a new realm of horror. The year was 1880. A steamship cut through cold waves, its passengers unaware that among them stood a man fleeing justice. Cream, his dark overcoat flapping in the sea wind, watched the endless waters with eyes that betrayed no remorse. He wasn't running from guilt, he was chasing opportunity. His next hunting grounds awaited him in America. When he arrived in Chicago, the city was alive, horse-drawn carriages rumbling over muddy streets, the clang of industry echoing through the air. But beneath the growing skyline and bright promises of progress, the same darkness lurked. Cream opened a medical practice, presenting himself as a respectable doctor. His office smelled of chemicals, medicine bottles lined in perfect order, a facade of healing that concealed the tools of death. His charm disarmed those who came to him for help. He treated young women seeking relief from illness or unwanted pregnancy, offering them his special formula. But each dose carried his signature poison, chloroform, strychnine, morphine, invisible killers that silenced screams before they began. Soon, death followed him like a shadow through Chicago's narrow streets. A woman found collapsed in her home after visiting the doctor. Another, pale and lifeless, discovered with a prescription bottle in hand. The police began to suspect a pattern, but Cream was clever, changing names, moving clinics, manipulating his victims with deceitful gentility. When suspicion closed in, he once again vanished, crossing north into Canada, where his crimes resumed with cold precision. The Canadian winter did little to freeze his ambition. In Montreal and Quebec, whispers of the poison. London, 1892. The city that once trembled under the terror of Jack the Ripper now faced a new kind of monster, one who killed not with a blade but with the precision of science. Welcome back to the Vale Echo. Tonight we return to the grim streets of London, where justice finally caught up with Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, the man the world would remember as the Doctor of Death. The evidence against him had become impossible to ignore. In dimly lit police stations, detectives traced a dark trail that stretched from the alleys of London to the bustling heart of Chicago and the frozen streets of Canada. Victims' names filled their files, each linked by one chilling constant poison. Cream's blackmail letters, his prescriptions, his arrogance, every clue screamed guilt. The day of his arrest was as gray as the soul they captured. Cream, dressed neatly in his physician's coat, offered only a faint smirk as the officers closed in. His medical bag, once a symbol of healing, lay open on the table, revealing vials of poison glinting under the lamplight. It was no longer the instrument of a doctor, but the weapon of a murderer. In the courtroom, the air was heavy, thick with dread. Spectators leaned forward, unable to look away. Cream stood motionless in the dock, his expression unreadable as witnesses recounted stories of his victims, women who had trusted him, only to find death in his medicine. The prosecution spoke with fury, calling him a predator in a physician's disguise. The jury, pale and shaken, returned with their verdict, guilty. But even in his final moments, Cream couldn't resist the twisted pride that defined him. As the guards escorted him through the cold corridors of Pentonville Prison, he whispered to a fellow inmate, claiming he was Jack the Ripper himself. Whether it was a lie born of madness or an attempt to steal the Ripper's infamy, no one truly knew. But his words would forever haunt the echoes of London's darkest legends. The morning of his execution dawned cold and gray. Crowds gathered outside the prison gates, eager to glimpse the man who had poisoned 3 nations. Inside, the gallows stood silent, the rope coiled and ready. Cream walked forward without fear, his eyes steady, his smirk still faintly visible. As the hangman placed the noose around his neck, time seemed to stand still, and then with a final drop, the life of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream came to its end. Outside, newspaper presses roared to life. Dr. Poisoner executed at Pentonville. The world exhaled, relieved yet uneasy. Evil had been caught, but its echo would linger. The same intellect that could have healed thousands had instead crafted a legacy of fear. And as the London fog swallowed the prison walls that night, one truth remained: monsters do not always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they wear white coats and smile. This was the story of Dr. Thomas Neill Cream, the doctor who poisoned history and the last shadow cast by the age of Jack the Ripper.